Welcome to the One Step Wealthier podcast, where I help you to get a little bit better every day and to achieve your financial goals. Follow along with me, and every week we will talk about all things personal development and personal finance. Together, we can get one step wealthier. Good morning and welcome to yet another One Step Wealthier episode. And today I wanted to talk about the topic that I recently discussed with someone at work and gave me an idea for an episode. So sometimes we hear that everything used to be so much better in the good old days. And I must say that I do not agree with this statement. So in today's episode, I wanted to do a little bit of a perspective check and invite you for some optimism without ignoring the problems. There is an illusion of the good old days, that the past times were always better and today everything is so bad. We are so unlucky to be living in today's world. And I think what is happening is that media coverage and also social media amplify all the negative news in the world. In the past, people weren't necessarily safer or happier. They just knew less. And they didn't have access to mobile phones, and there was no possibility to share an instant story on what was happening in their village, in their region, or in their country. There were no phones back then in the concentration camps or in the Soviet gulags. So therefore, nobody could actually report that directly. It was more a general media coverage, maybe much more delayed and also carefully selected. There was no such thing as Instagram back in 1940s. And I think at the moment we shouldn't ignore all the freedoms that we currently have, that we can do things like stock market investing from a phone in seconds. We can participate in the global economy, and we have free and affordable access to education, not necessarily the university education, the conventional one, but also we can learn about any skill for free on YouTube. We can have so much knowledge accessible instantly. And also, we shouldn't ignore the freedom of speech that we have. In this podcast, I can say anything I wanted, and nobody will come to my house tomorrow and arrest me for voicing out any opinion that I have. That freedom of speech was not there in the past. In the past, you couldn't voice out your opinion just because you thought one thing or another. Obviously, there are limits to that, but generally, nobody will arrest you for having your own opinion. And also, I cannot ignore the fact that I'm a female and I can choose not to marry, and I can choose not to have kids and to manage my own money. Not so long ago, that was not possible. That would be seen as something not allowed to me. I couldn't even open a bank account. I'm not even talking about investing in the stock market. I couldn't even have something under my own name. That would have to be under the name of my father or my husband. And if I didn't have a husband, probably the only place that I could go to is the nunnery. We cannot really ignore that, because I think at the moment, as women, we are so much better off, and also about the minorities as well. The minorities have never had so much freedom as they have now. Whoever you identify as, you have so much more freedom. And when I look at my mom, she actually married my dad when she was 20 in the Soviet Lithuania, and she had me a year later. She was not forced to get married, and they're still together happily ever after with my dad. They're still happily married. However, I think if she wasn't living in that environment, she probably would have either married later or considered other choices. But at the time, she didn't know any better, because everybody around her was doing the same. And if she would choose not to marry or not to have kids, then people would actually consider her as being weird. And nowadays, my situation is actually very common. And if I wanted to get married, I could choose to get married and have children. But if I decide that I want to travel the world and I do not want to settle down and I want to live my own life, that's much more common in this world. And we have to admit that in previous generations, there was less financial independence. You pretty much worked your whole life. There was a standard education that you would go to university, but you couldn't just retrain. There was much less common to retrain in the middle of your life to do something else. And there's so much freedom for that now as well. And also, at the moment, I'm recording my episode just with the cheap microphone from Amazon, and I have my laptop. In the past, I couldn't just do that. I would need a studio and I would need a permission to talk about what I wanted to talk. And probably I would be in the radio, but because I'm a female, I would probably not even be allowed to talk about any finance stuff. So this is the irony of me recording the podcast and me being able to voice out my opinion that I wouldn't be able to do that in the 70s. So I've traveled quite extensively and I've been to over 70 countries, and I've realized that most of those countries are very safe. I'm not talking about the war-torn countries. There are always places that aren't safe, but the majority of the places in the world are extremely safe. And also places like Sub-Saharan Africa, they do not look like most of us imagined before going there. They're actually pretty modern. People are not starving. And again, I'm not talking about places where there is war. I'm talking about just the other 99% of remaining places. People are happy there and people are living in normal lives. They might be poorer than in the West, but there's not that much difference. And there was a book that I read quite recently. It's called Factfulness. I invite you to read that if you still think that the world is a really awful place, because it compares the data of how the world was then in the past and how it is now. And that book gives you a lot of hope because it actually studies all the myths that we think about how the world is, and it bombards you with the data on how the world really is right now. And again, I'm not saying that the world is perfect. It never was, and unfortunately, it probably never will be. Things can always be better. And I do recognize the current inequalities. There's still so much work to do, so much effort to improve what is right now. But I also would like to highlight the progress. There is so much less global violence and so many more human rights. And I think that being born now is a privilege. And we do have to be happy about that. And also, we have to use the opportunities that this current world is providing us. And again, I want to stress that I'm not saying that things are perfect. Things are far from perfect. But I wouldn't trade places with the past. No way, I wouldn't live in the past. I'm so happy to live right here, right now. And if you found this episode useful, would you mind sharing it with someone who might like it too? The One Step Wealthier podcast grows one listener at a time, and it means so much to me when you share this. Thank you. And if this resonated and you want to talk more about your money journey, I'm opening up a few free coaching spots. Just message me on Instagram or email me. And remember, the best time to invest was yesterday and the second best is today. And please note that I do not know your situation and any advice given on this podcast is not individual financial advice. Please do your own research before making any financial decisions. You have just invested in your personal development by listening to this podcast. Thank you for being here and helping yourself to become one step wealthier. Don't forget to subscribe to access new content every week and to better yourself. Stay wealthy, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.